Welcome to the show. I'm Mitch Goldberg. We have Israel versus Iran. We have the dollar that people don't stop talking about this. What's going on with it? Losing its reserve currency. Why is that even important? You should know what that means, why it's a pretty big deal, and just massive confusion, crackdown on illegal immigrants, what that's doing to businesses. Are we getting inflation from tariffs? Yes or no? Home builder sentiment plunges. So we need to talk about a couple things, put things in perspective. There's a lot of dots to connect. And I think people are just like, there's so much going on that it's difficult to explain things uh, in just a couple of sentences. And what I like to do is I want to put all of this in perspective, give you an update on what's happening so you could leave the show saying, I get it now, because it's all about you making the best decisions for you. All right, so let me roll a quick intro and we're going to talk about this. Please stick around while you're watching. Please give me a thumbs up. It helps us spread the good word to the rest of your contacts of the fine job that we're doing here. It's unbiased. It's important to know this stuff. Again, we're calling balls and strikes here. I just don't care about the uniform people are wearing. I just want to make sure you're making the right financial decisions for you. And when there's a lot of news and confusion going around, makes it easier to make the wrong decision. All right, so here we go. All right, the market dropped today. By the way, I'm Mitch Goldberg. Welcome to the show. Be the boss of your money. I'm with a wealth management firm. It's called Client First Strategy. If you ask me what's in a name, I'd say everything. That's why we call ourselves Client First. We put you first. Israel bombing the crap out of Iran. Israel has complete control of the skies over Iran. And Iran is like, oh, now we want to talk peace and, you know, have a ceasefire and maybe have an agreement on things like, developing nuclear weapons. They only did this because of something called peace through strength. Iran has very few, if any, allies. In fact, right now they're completely isolated. Russia, not only is Russia bogged down in a war of its own, but Russia actually needs all the weapons it can get. And it even relies on Iran to make more Shahed drones so that Russia could just keep hurling them at major civilian centers throughout Ukraine. The other ally that Iran thought it could count on is China. But China isn't really good at fighting wars from far away. They have an army that is made to develop, or they have an army that is made to defend the homeland, but they don't project power. They don't have the Air Force. They don't have the naval assets to really park giant, destroyers and aircraft carriers all over the world and fight. It's really nothing they can do. The one who really gets hurt in all this, if Iran's oil fields are down, is China. 90% of Iranian oil goes to China. So China's watching this very carefully, and they've got a lot to be worried about. If Iranian oil goes off market, it hurts China. This is why nobody thinks that Iran would block the Strait of Hormuz, where a lot of oil goes through. It's the biggest oil moving lane, sea lane in the world. Nobody thinks that Iran would block it. They wouldn't be able to block it anyway. They just don't have the naval assets to do it. They could cause skirmishes, but other countries have bigger, better navies. Plus, again, Israel could fly over that pretty quickly. The U.S. could put their navy there, and not a problem. So, what was expected was that if you declare war or if you attack Iran, that they would go into Saudi Arabian oil fields and they would shoot their weapons at American bases and other European bases. None of that's happening. I get the feeling that President Trump will just say to the Ayatollah, go ahead, make my day, attack one of our bases and see what happens to you. They're not doing anything. So Iran's hurling some missiles into Israel. Some of them are getting through their what do you call it? There's Sling One, Sling Two, their Iron Dome, etc. They've got their Arrow. They've got three different defenses for short range, medium range, and long range dome. Air defenses. So when is this going to end? Israel clearly sees themselves having the upper hand. I'm giving you the geopolitical update first, and I'm telling you things that because we're all watching the same TV. The same stuff is being reported. So, but I just want to give you the lay of the land. Now, where do we go here as an economy, as the stock market, and then to you personally, financially? Because that's what needs explaining, and that's what I have to give you all this pretext. Okay, so China gets hurt the most. The beneficiary end from this is Russia, because if the price of oil goes up, Russia makes more money and they get to sell more oil at higher prices to China and to India. So if Iranian oil comes offline, it's a problem. I don't know if Iranian oil at the moment is online or not. I haven't seen anything about that, but I would imagine it could be turned off at any second, and already Israel has gone after some of Iran's energy assets. I just don't know to what extent. Would that be a problem for the U.S. economy? We have the world has plenty of oil. It's just now a matter of distribution and pumping. But the United States has its own oil reserves. We are the biggest producer. We also get Canadian oil. We get Mexican oil. We export oil. The reason why we don't just keep oil here is because not all of our oil is best suited for our refineries. So oil gets moved around all over the world. That's why, when oil goes up, that's why it's called a global price. It's not just what we pay. American oil, U.S. West Texas Intermediate is typically a little bit cheaper than Brent, which is the global standard price for oil, as opposed to the U.S. standard, which is West Intermediate. But they basically stay more or less the same. So if one goes up, the other one goes up. One goes down, the other one goes down. That relationship isn't really changing. With the price of oil up for a couple of days, if it lasts for a few more days, I would definitely expect you and I to see higher prices at the pump. That's inflationary. That could hurt a little bit. But home builder sentiment is down, and everything I see is the cost of housing in terms of prices of houses and in terms of rent. Those are starting to weaken, at least not go up. And since that's about a third of the consumer price index, or about half the consumer price index, and about a third of the PCE, that is the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation index, you could actually see inflation stay pretty low. Now, what about tariffs? Aren't tariffs supposed to raise inflation? They're doing it a little bit. It hasn't been felt yet in the general economy, and that's okay. I got a weird comment here, Amani. Yeah, folks, listen, I'm not going to show your comment if you send me like a weird comment trying to, tout your scheme or your crypto scheme or whatever. I get comments like, I don't show every comment because a lot of the comments I get are just like somebody's trying to not really do something good here. So if you have your smart comments and your smart questions, ask away. Other than that, I'm not posting this crap that I see here. Okay. So let me go on. We have the tariffs. It hasn't been inflationary yet. Companies are adjusting, cutting prices. We really haven't seen any shortage of products yet. That was a worry when we had like 145% tariff on Chinese goods, but now it's a 30% tariff. We should start seeing it's expected, according to the Federal Reserve and top economists and Wall Street analysts, we should start to see the inflationary pressures in July. They said that we'd see it in May. They said we'd see it in June. June 11th last week, we got the last CPI numbers. Haven't seen it yet, so we should see it in July. But I want to tell you that people don't spend less money if there's inflation, even if it's from tariffs, which is arbitrary as opposed to a more natural rate of inflation. They just buy less goods. If I'm going to spend my $10,000 a month on my lifestyle, I'm still spending that. I just might buy less things. It might mean a dinner out that gets canceled, or it might mean, you know, you know, putting off a pair of sneakers. You know, people make their own decisions and spend their money the way they have to. So, but we haven't seen it yet. My point is, I would be more worried at this point about a slowdown in the economy than I would about inflation. That's called stagflation. So which one is worse? We could debate that, but the Federal Reserve typically worries more about inflation than it does about a slowing economy. But if we start to see jobs come down in the last couple of jobs figures that have been out from the non-farm payroll figures, they've been coming in lower and lower and lower. Home builder sentiment is going lower and lower and lower. Consumer sentiment tanked. It rebounded a little bit, but not to where it was before the tariffs. And retail sales figures came in today a little bit weaker. There's no doubt that we're starting to see some slowdown, and there's a lot of confusion. When you see raids in LA and you're seeing the same things over and over from different angles, you start to think this is all over the place. Oh my goodness, LA is burning down and it's going to happen everywhere else. That's the news for you. I'm not knocking the media. Everyone is doing this, but I'm here to put it in perspective and say, I don't like any of it, what's happening. Some people do. But what I'm seeing is that this affects the economy because a source of cheap labor is either hiding at home, because if you go out to your job, to the hotel you work in, to the farm you work on, to the meat packing plant you work in, or, you know, to anywhere else you go, people aren't going. They're not going to go to work because they don't want to get arrested and deported. So you're seeing people not show up at work, and those that do have a good shot of being deported. So we're losing a source of cheap labor. Is that good or bad? Well, there's advantages to having a cheap source of labor. They do have to pay taxes without ever getting benefits. So people say, oh, they're getting benefits. They're getting benefits that Americans could get. Not really. And they do pay taxes, and they do jobs that, like, peeling fruit and cleaning toilets and bars and stuff that Americans aren't really doing. And they're working in cotton fields, they're working in strawberry fields, in agriculture, meat packing plants. They're in construction. So, we're trying to solve a problem with a very blunt instrument, but that is causing fear in people. It's causing spending to go down. Whether if you're for or against it, some people are going to reduce spending because they're worried. That's all it takes to impact all of us. So it does impact all of us. And then you have the wars. I think people have gotten used to the war in Ukraine and Russia. And since the whole thing with Iran and Israel broke out, you don't hear anything about Russia anymore. And then yesterday, Trump leaves early. The meeting of the G7, that's the G7 nations, the biggest economic nations or most developed nations. China's a bigger economy than the rest of the group, not combined, but they would be the biggest. But that's America, Germany, Italy, France, UK, Canada, and Japan. Trump had to leave early before they could come out with a strong communique of goals that they have as a group to shape the global economy. And Trump warns that, he left because he said the situation, he's got to go to the Situation Room and you know what's going on. And then Macron said, well, he's going to see if he could see about a ceasefire. And Trump says, no. And social media, that's not true. This guy doesn't know anything. I didn't tell him what I'm doing or thinking. He's just grandstanding. And Trump was right about that because Macron does not have any inkling into what Trump is thinking. Trump didn't tell him that, as far as we know. But yesterday he said, you should leave Tehran. If you live there, if you're in the city, leave. And today he said, the Ayatollah, you're still alive, but we know where to find you. These are fighting words that I've never heard. Now, the United States goes after terrorists. But, in my lifetime, I have never heard of the United States threatening the head of state of another country. So this is really new territory for us. And that's causing confusion. It makes you think, do I really want to buy stocks today? Do I really want to move now? A lot of people start to put their plans on pause, not just because of that, but because of the totality of everything going on. So Trump says that, says you better come to the deal. You said I want a total surrender, and we have complete control over the skies of Iran, thanks to Israel, and they're the ones who did it. The trade talks, the peace talks were going nowhere, and Israel had enough, and they decided the loser in all this is going to be us with a nuclear weapon destroying our population. It's a small country, and they're doing what they had to do, what they feel they had to do. I know not everybody's for it, not everybody's against it. I understand, but this is what you're watching in the news, and it's starting to impact markets and spilling over into consumers making financial decisions. That is the pretext, okay? So China gets 90% of Iranian oil. So they're at a disadvantage because they really can't do anything about it. And now they would have to completely rely on Russia for oil. And then Russia could say, well, you want more oil, you could now give us more weapons. So that is a win for Russia, even though they're losing a source of weapons from Iran, the Shahid bombs. I don't know if Israel destroyed the plants, the manufacturing areas where those glide bombs and those drones are made that Iran sells to Russia on the cheap. We will find out. Let's talk about the dollar. Why is the dollar a big deal? Because as a reserve currency, the nation that has a reserve currency attracts the most investments from global investors. So if you're an investor, where are you going to put your money? Probably the country with a reserve currency, the reserve currency. So that has been good for the last, since World War II. That has been good for our stock market. It's been good for our bond market. Americans have enjoyed, generally speaking, lower interest rates than they otherwise would have had it not been for the reserve currency, the dollar, the reserve status. Now, some people don't know what makes a reserve currency, but a reserve currency is based on English law. Any currency that is functional as a global currency, like the euro, the yen, the pound, based on English law, it's based on rules, adherence to law, adherence to contracts, English rule contracts. It goes back 1,000 years what a currency is based on. It's not just based on a military, because Russia would have a strong currency then. It's not just based on an economy, because then the Chinese yuan would be a reserve currency. It's not. There's a lot of things that take place to make a currency viable. But if your currency is weakening and there's dollar flight, and global investors are deciding, I want to maybe diversify away from dollar holdings, it means less U.S. stocks, less U.S. bonds, and more foreign bonds and foreign stocks. So it could benefit emerging markets. It could benefit developed markets. That's why the stock markets of the European Union are doing much better this year than the American markets, because people want to get away from the dollar. So if you invest in the dollar, how do you invest in the dollar? By buying U.S. stocks and by buying U.S. bonds. How do you get out of the dollar? Where do you put your money? You put it into gold. You put it into foreign stocks like European exchanges, European blue chip stocks. You could put it into crypto. You see what's working. Everything that is working today is screaming at you that says this is moving. That it all means money is moving out of dollar denominated assets into other assets. That's what this whole thing's like. I see Tom is out there. Tom, thank you so much for the thumbs up. You're always so supportive. Really appreciate it. Please send my best to the fam. So that is why that's why, excuse me, that's why the dollar is so important. So I want to put something up on my screen. Okay. There's an index that you should get familiar with. It's dot. This is how you punch it up at CNBC. .dxy. By the way, you can't invest directly into an index, but you can invest in a security that tracks your Mimics index. But the Dixie DXY, and when I punch it up, I have to do .dxy. You could do the same thing, and it measures the dollar against a basket of 6 currencies. The currencies are here. The weighting is 57%. See that? 57%. I can't highlight it, but let me see if I can make it bigger. All right. It's 57% the euro, 13.6% the yen, Japanese yen. Okay, Canadian, um, Swedish krona, Swiss franc. All right, British pound. That's the GBP. All right. So I would look at this little chart here. So it's really the dollar versus a handful of indexes. It used to be 10 index. I meant 10 currencies. It used to be 10 currencies, but once the euro came around, it dropped the French franc, it dropped the Italian lira, the German Deutschmark, French franc. So it got rid of those currencies because they all became part of the euro. So when you see there's no dollars in this index, it's the dollar versus this index. So when you see this index go down, it means the dollar is getting weaker. When you see it go up, it means the dollar is getting stronger. So you should know that, because if we lose, we're not going to lose reserve currency. I don't think that happens. There could be two reserve currencies. There could be maybe three reserve currencies. As long as the US dollar is a reserve currency, it's good. But the less of the smaller it gets compared to other reserve currencies in terms of investment, the worse it is for the United States. The United States has a very innovative economy because we've always attracted investment money for innovation from both domestic and foreign investors. We don't want to lose that edge. And that's one of the reasons why the dollar is important. And when you start to exploit the dollar in terms of using it as a weapon of war, like with tariffs, it gets the rest of the world thinking, I'm relying too much on the dollar. I can no longer find this currency or the policies of the country as reliable as they were. I don't really know what's going on. It's not predictable anymore. Now, some people in the United States say, that's good, that's what we want. No, I beg to differ. And I think long term, it's going to be a lot more negative than positive. I just, when people are so pro tariff, I don't think they're thinking long term. Tariffs at the beginning help raise some money for the U.S. Treasury. That's why they're taxed, by the way. American companies that import goods from other companies, which are the private sector. These American companies are private companies, and they have to collect the tariffs. They have to pay the tariffs. Not collect. They don't collect. They pay them. American companies pay the tariffs. They don't collect it. They pay it. That money is then collected by the U.S. Treasury. Just like you, when you pay your federal income taxes, you're writing your check out to the U.S. Treasury. Okay, that's why tariffs are a tax, and that is passed along to consumers. If the expenses of a company go up, there's two things a company could do. They could cut their expenses to keep their prices low, or they say to their consumers, sorry, but we have to raise our prices. It's very difficult to raise your prices when you have competitors. But if everybody has to raise their prices at the same time, then you have carte blanche to raise your prices too, because you're not going to suffer from cheaper competition. All right. So that's how that works. So I'm really glad we're having this talk, because I don't think people really quite got it. JP Morgan Chase is unveiling a new Sapphire Reserve card with an $800 annual fee, better airport access, more perks. All of the companies, American Express, they're all raising their top tier credit cards because their airport lounges are just getting too crowded. And what I saw somebody say is, the perks from credit cards are to help people travel like champagne on a beer budget. But that's starting to change. But companies are still betting on the high-end consumer, and I don't think anything is going to change. News just out: Trump weighs potential U.S. military strike on Iran, demands unconditional surrender. A lot of the MAGA in his party are against intervention in foreign wars. So this, that news that I'm just reading to you, and I'll put it on the screen. All right, let me put this on the screen so you can see it for yourself. All right, do you see that? Hold on. All right. Sorry, do you see that? Let's put this up here. Trump waves potential U.S. military strike in Iran, demands unconditional surrender. This is like, as serious as it gets. It means we are ready to declare war on another country. No doubt we have the upper hand, and no doubt for me personally, I like to see Trump take advantage of the situation because, I think we all agree that a weak Iran that has supported uh, crises and terror attacks on all over the world, Argentina, Iran hostage crisis. We've had so many things over the years. I think we've become like immune to it and forget that Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis are all funded by Iran. They're basically Iran just spread out. Okay, I'm sorry, Iran. It's not Iran or Iraq. It's Iran and Iraq, right? Somebody likes to explain. So a couple of other things. India regulators, I don't know if that news is coming up. They see no major safety concern on Air India's Boeing 787 fleet. They're still investigating what happened with the plane crash there about a week ago. The 787 Dreamliner, first one to ever crash. By the way, the airline, that particular aircraft has a stellar track record. And I think what they want to know, is it a problem with the plane? Was it a problem with the pilots? Was it a problem with the control tower? Did they put too much stuff in the plane? Because it just looked like it could just not get airborne enough to finally catch some lift. And it just kept going down until it crashed, landed in some apartment buildings, and about 30 people on the ground were killed, and all but one passenger and crew member were survived. All but one were dead, rather, I should say, were killed. Very, very sad. So there's some other things going on. And I just want to point out one last thing before I go, because we're coming up to the time limit. Okay. Probably the most important headline, other than stuff with Iran and Israel and President Trump. This is the most important headline. All right, bummer. Now my technology's freezing up. So let me see if I could just do a quick share screen. Okay. Share screen. I'm doing something on the fly here. This is what I want to share. All right. You see that? Oh, look at that. I love when the technology works. AI will shrink Amazon's workforce in the coming years. Think about that. This is the most overt time, or the most overt major company CEO publicly say, I'm shrinking my workforce and raising profits by using AI. That's pretty significant. It's no surprise that a company like Amazon would use AI, but it's just so overt to me that they're doing it. And I think that that's a bigger concern and a bigger weight. That's going to be a bigger weight on employment than tariffs are going to be. And in that case, it doesn't matter how much the Federal Reserve cuts rates to stimulate the economy. If people are losing their jobs from AI, that has nothing to do with interest rates. That is just a constant move of companies to become more efficient. I want to say that Paul Volcker, who was the Fed chairman in 1980, he's credited with killing inflation, because inflation was very high in the 70s and the early 80s. So he raised rates dramatically to tamp down inflation by causing two recessions in quick successions in 80 and 82. I don't want to give him so much credit. The personal computer started landing on people's desks in corporate America in 1980. And with that came this huge increase in office and workplace efficiencies. And it's those efficiencies that ultimately brought down inflation. And then you connected computers with the internet, and you saw inflation come down even more in the 90s, and you had a massive surge in productivity. It remains to be seen if artificial intelligence causes this surge in productivity, or it just causes a drop in employment. I think we get the surge in productivity. People have to find different jobs, and new jobs that we haven't even thought of will come out. But it's a scary thing to go through, But every single other time where technology has had a major impact in the economy in terms of efficiency, we've come out ahead. And I don't see why this time is going to be any different. All right, that's the whole show. Thank you so much for watching and for sticking with me. If you like what you see here, again, please give me a thumbs up, like the show, and tell your friends about it. Leave a comment if you want to reach out to me about your investing and your financial planning and all that good stuff. You can always reach out to me, and we'll have a discussion one-on-one over the phone or in person to see if we're a good fit and to see how I can help you. All right, thanks and have a great day.